In this documentary, we are going to give you an in-depth overview on the Japanese Empire's foreign relations with the United States during the sequences building up to Pearl Harbour, in particular during the 1930s. In 1868, the Meiji Restoration instigated radical modernization throughout the Empire of Japan. This restoration was a chain of events which restored imperial rule to Japan through Emperor Meiji. Japan had initiated a newfound quest for wealth and power and prestige among both the government and the general population. It was a turning point for the Empire of Japan, and over the next 60 years, developed Japan into a militarized state with prolific ambition. The growing modernization of Japan can primarily be seen through Japan defeating Russia in the 1902 Russo-Japanese War. This in turn led to Asian nationalists to regard Japan as Asia's natural leader. Although the United States were against Japan's growing military authority, Japan justified its continual military prowess through the blood debt left over by the Russo-Japanese War. Altercations and foreign relations between the Americans and Japanese stayed at arm's length until the 1930s, when Japan was once again unsettled.
The 1930s depression of the United States advertised the segregation of world economies. This harshly coincided with Japan's leaders' stern belief in economic liberalism. That is, the freedom of economies. The United States began to cease trading internationally, bullying Europe into adopting a similar practice. Japan saw this as an ultimate insult due to their heavy reliance on the United States for resources. The Japanese aggression in Manchuria in 1931, of which was backed by the United States. This was in retaliation to the United States for deadlocking their economy. The Japanese justified their actions through three main points. 1. The shortage of raw materials. 2. Rapidly expanding Japanese population. And 3. The division of the world into economical blocks. Japan's growing isolation abroad was then compounded when Hideki was assassinated in May 1932 by right-wing extremists. In their attempted coup on the 26th of February 1936, national unity was skewed towards a greater military power. This gave the military a veto over the cabinet and the power to topple government. Fuminaro Konoe became prime minister in 1940 before failing to deliver a popular civilian government. He was subsequently removed, and when General Hideki Tojo came into power in October 1941, he further increased the military power of Japan.
Japan's futile world relations were once again hindered when Nazi Germany began its European campaign. The Japanese feared the Germans would try to reclaim their islands granted to Japan from World War I. These territories were vital to Japan's supply route for their men and materials to and from the Japanese mainland. The Japanese then felt obliged to strengthen their own position further south, thus embarked on a southward advance into French Indochina.
The Japanese also began negotiations with the Netherlands East Indies to increase the quota of oil exports to Japan in case the US blocked the oil supply. To defuse the threat of war with Russia, on the 13th of April 1941, Japan signed a neutrality pact with the Soviets. In June 1941, negotiations with the Netherlands East Indies broke down, and on the 2nd of July, the Japanese endorsed their southward advance. The United States, in response, imposed a de facto oil embargo, which was of huge importance in instigating the Japanese army's advance southwards due to their restricted oil supply, which was said to only last 2 years if they did not act. On the 26th of November 1941, a memorandum was issued by US Secretary of State Cordell Hull, demanding that Japan completely withdraw from China. Now, one could say at this point, Japanese-American relations had crumbled. And later that day, the Japanese fleet sailed for Pearl Harbour, based on the fear that America would militarily act, with Japan not withdrawing from Manchuria. Japan's annexation of territory throughout Southeast Asia was an immediate cause of war in the Pacific. However, the real tensions between America and Japan were created over China. Japan wanted to keep it, but the United States insisted that Japan relinquish the territory. Japan believed that Allied weakness in Southeast Asia, courtesy of Pearl Harbour, would mean another short war. Japan, however, had awakened the fury of America, ultimately leading to their total defeat.
If I could change the world, now having studied Pearl Harbour, I would ensure the country's education of right-wing militaristic regimes, not underestimating the opponent, and a world without diplomacy.